Oh, you know what I love?
Sports.
Love sports.
Sports. When
When it comes to
Texas A&M.
Where are you getting this information?
Let me tell you.
Welcome to TexAgs.
TexAgs Live.
I feel like I should be listening to the theme song from the Jeffersons. You know, we're moving on up.
We will develop men, we will graduate players, and we will win championships on the field.
It's a blessing to be in this position, and we're just thankful to be here. We're thankful to have the opportunity to go out there and play in front of the 12 man.
He is a guy that has gotten better and better and better. He's just got that dog in him.
It's been special. The 12th man this past week was unbelievable.
And this is a real program. It's not fake. This is a real place. And if you want to be really good at football, this is a really good place to be.
You know, if I'm betting on anybody, it's the Aggies.
Welcome into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Let me just start off by saying that all three of us were supposed to match today, and Matthew Dawson decided to go against the grain. It's great to see some young blood hosting this episode of TexAgs Live. I'm Luke Evangelist. He's Matthew Dawson, and we're going to keep Olin Buchanan as young as possible on today's episode. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and this is the Go Hour, presented by The Warehouse at CC Creations. Olin.
You know, I live by the motto, you're only young once in your life, but you can be immature the rest of your life.
I like that.
Yeah. Words to live by. I know I have.
Nobody doubts that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Your TexAgs shirt looks kind of red. Mine looks more maroon than yours.
Yeah, I mean, I just probably got this about 2 years ago. I think I got a newer batch, and they might have changed the color of maroon.
Don't you think that looks almost red?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I wish I had one that was your color, but
yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things I have you wish you had.
Let's not spend the next hour discussing those at length. Let's actually talk about something that I think all of us are interested in, with 25 and 25 coming up. As if you don't know, that is what we do every year, except the number changes. It's 25 players or 24 players in that amount of days.
Why are we doing that?
Because we want to preview the best players on the A&M roster. The players leading into the season.
On TexAgs Live.
Yeah. We go through every player, one player each day,
I know
25
how it works.
days.
I've been here longer than you.
I know. I'm just refreshing the audience who may not know.
Right.
But
I was
voting,
just reminding them what they're watching.
Exactly, yeah. We talked about that.
Oh, did you? Did I miss that?
Yeah, I think you were thinking of what you were going to say in terms of young and old.
My bad. See, I'm old. I forgot.
Well,
old and forgetful.
And that's okay, because we're going to help him along this episode. Voting closes in exactly 1 week for 25 and 25. So we want to give a refresher on how you can vote and where you can vote.
You can go to the TexAgs forums, go to Billy Lucci's premium forum. You're going to find that post, and it's a simple Google form. You fill out your top 25 and have a nice day, I guess. But your voting is only going to count for about 25% of it, because OB, for some reason, accounts for a quarter of it. Billy and David also
It's all this knowledge.
For the other half of it. So, but look, you know, we talked about, Luke and I, like...
How much do you think my opinion should be worth on this?
100%.
You want to know?
Yeah.
You really want to know?
Yeah.
We can talk about it later.
No, do it right here. It's okay.
I think I should probably count for 100%, but I would take your advice. Like, I would let you talk into my ear, but I would ultimately make the final decision.
You would make the final decision.
If it was up to me.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it's not. You know, sometimes you can be, you know, really, really smart, but sometimes you think you're smarter than you are. And I think we just stumbled onto one of those times here.
Well, look, I could go back through your list from 2024. We could talk about that.
Yeah, we could talk about your list from 2024.
Oh, that's fine.
But hey,
I remember several years ago, I was the only guy who voted that had Cullen Gillaspia in the top 25. And I said, oh, he's a special team player. He makes plays. He's one of the better players. So I think, you know, I have a good track record.
Well, I'll give you credit too. You put Will Lee higher than anyone else, higher than Billy, higher than David, higher than the fans last year. So I'll give you credit for that. Although there are some.
I was all in on Connor Wigman last year.
So was everyone. There was a unanimous, you know, number one. But in fact, Billy was actually the only one that put Marcel Reed in his top 25. Believe it or not.
Last year.
Yeah, he put him at 24, I think.
Okay.
So
Well, I mean, he's the boss.
he is the boss, and he knows things.
Yeah, he knows things. Yeah.
Yeah, this is TexAgs. We know things.
Yeah, Obi, since you've got such a knack for finding those players who everyone else might not be thinking
You know,
of.
I'm looking at this. Luke and Matt, you were halfway to the gospel here.
Where's John? We don't even have a John.
And Mark's his dad.
Yeah.
I got a brother named John.
We could have, we could have got the whole gospel here. All right. What were you going to ask me?
You've got such a knack for finding those players that maybe the fans or the audience isn't thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Who is someone that you may put in your 25 and 25, kind of towards the back end, that people aren't necessarily talking about enough?
Ashton Bethel Roman.
Boom. Luke says the same thing.
That's one of my guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential there. I can't even remember if I put him in my top 25. I probably did not, because I like to put 75% of my vote is predicated on what I've actually seen you do. I think production means more to me than potential, but sometimes the potential is so great that you do give that a little more what's the word I'm looking for? A little more consideration.
Sure. I think the reason why I didn't put that in terms of my players that fans might be underrating is because I think you could say that about several wide receivers.
So they're giving you a vote this year?
No, they're not.
Oh.
But I keep track of all the voting.
Oh,
so
okay.
I put all your numbers together. And
Okay. So you could skew the vote if you wanted to.
I really
You're
could.
like that governor in Arizona?
Yeah, I could. I am that governor in Arizona.
Okay.
But because you also
You're
said
about the same height.
What, 6 feet tall?
No, she's about 5'4". I always said one of the reasons, though, that he's vertically challenged is because his brain is so big. He's so smart with the brain. It thwarted the upward progress. Like if you're bench pressing and it's just too heavy. You get to that point where you just can't. You need somebody to spot you.
Yeah. What does that say about you if you're so tall?
It probably means I'm a dumbass. I don't know.
One time, I was sitting right there in that corner, and we were maybe 40 seconds from going on air, and Obi just grabs his calf. He's like, "Oh my god, dude, oh my god!" David's like, "Obi, are you all right?" And then he's like, "I got a cramp. He sprints out of the room. I don't even know, what did you do to save your leg? I mean,
sometimes when I get a leg cramp, every old guy out there knows. Sometimes you just gotta, stand up and stretch it out. Stretch that leg out, so the cramp, or there's different kind. But in my case, that's what I had to do. So that's what I did.
Can't imagine what that looked like in those shorts. That probably would have been a sight to behold.
Well, it is. It is. I'm a sexy man. Well,
All right, but
what can I tell you?
Can I get back on track though?
Yeah.
Okay, Ashton Bethel Roman. I didn't put him on there because I think you could say that about multiple different guys, right? Depends how you feel about Isaiah Williams. That's a guy, fantastic spring game. I mean, catch after catch. Mm-hmm. That's a guy.
Well, if you want to go on fantastic spring game, then you would take Marco Jones.
That's one of my guys as well. I think we're on the same page here.
Yeah, you guys kind of had the same exact thing right there. I mean, fantastic spring game, guy that, people haven't seen yet. I'm not sure that you would put him in your top 25 based on production that you've seen, but you did see him in the spring game.
Yeah.
Does that count for something?
I always say spring games are like wandering through the desert. And you see that oasis. Now, is that an oasis or is it a mirage? And you don't know until you get there.
True.
So
I think my thinking on Marco Jones is he might not be one of the 25 best players heading into the season, but it would not at all shock me if we look back on the end of the season and he was one of your 25 most productive or best players.
Right, and that's why you take productivity, okay? But if there's a lot of potential, you say, okay, well maybe I put him in the top 25 based on what I think he might do. But I still put more emphasis on what has actually been done.
And even if you did put him in there, there's still a chance he might not even end up in the final 25 and 25 because, Matt, you could rig the votes and put Miles O'Neill at 9 and push out Marco Jones.
I've had years where I had guys probably in the top 10 and they wouldn't have been in the top 10 when it's said and done. And I've had years when I had guys maybe at the bottom of the list and they end up in the top 10. So
I said Tyler White. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me that you say it. I'm just saying that if one of your top 25 players is a punter, you're probably not going to have a good team.
Look, I think like
I don't know. Look, how many? If A&M's offense is as good as I think it's going to be, how many times a game do you think?
3.5.
Okay, so one of the 25 best players plays 3.5 plays a game. Maybe they'll let him hold on field goals so they can get him out there a little bit more.
Okay, but
So one of your top 25 players, you only want on the field 3.5 times. I know you want to get the ball into your best player's hands, but I don't think that's the idea they have in mind. Man, he's one of our best players. We got to get the ball in the punter's hand.
look, I'm not advocating for him
Is he
to
a
get
great
the ball
punter?
more.
He's a very good punter with the potential to be a great punter.
He was third in the entire country in percentage of his punts being downed inside of the 20-yard line. Now, we talked about this a little bit off air. Sure, some of that's luck, some of that's situational, right? Depends where you are on the field. That's pretty crazy, all right? 25 down punts inside the 20 versus 6 touchbacks, that's pretty insane. He only punted the ball 46 times last year.
You know, one year, Baylor, this would have been about 15 years ago, had a punter on the, I don't know if y'all knows what media guides are because they've kind of gone. But so you'd put out the big media guide and you'd put what you're really proud of on the cover, and Baylor had a punter on the cover of its media guide. And not surprisingly, that year, the Bears experienced major suckage.
How good does a punter have to be to justify putting him on the cover? Like Braden Mann, for example, greatest college football punter.
Yeah, maybe if you're
until that point.
Maybe I would say I could think of 2 punters in A&M history that would, and if I put them in the top 25, they'd be 25th probably, and that would be Braden Mann and Shane Leckler.
See, I'm way high. I think punters are extremely important.
They're important, especially if you don't have one. But again,
You don't appreciate a punter until you don't have it. You don't have it.
Right, that's what I just said.
Yeah, like it is okay when you have a good defense, all right, and you run the ball a lot, like we anticipate this offense, doing. Field position matters so much.
You don't say.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Obi.
Okay, Stephen Hawking.
I'm just trying to make the. I'm trying to
out the game of football.
It's like it's all expanding.
See, here's what's going to get misconstrued here. It's going to sound like I'm anti Tyler White, which is absolutely. I just said the potential to be great, potential to be an All-American. If we're lucky, he punts. He's on the field for 3 plays or less, and that's one of your best 25 players. I'm not on board with that.
Sometimes it's about quality and not quantity of plays.
So, like, positional value matters a lot to you, Obi.
I think to be one of your top 25 players, you actually need to be on the field more than like 2% of the game.
Well, what if maybe you are a top 25 player, but you just don't have the luxury of seeing the field very often because of your position?
I think
like Cullen Gillaspia, you said he's a special teamer.
Yeah, but he played a lot more than that.
True.
He played on all special teams, and he made tackles. I mean, I can remember a tackle he made against Tennessee on a kickoff, forced a fumble, and A&M got a short field and scored because field position matters. And he got a short field and scored, and it ended up being a huge play because A&M won that game in overtime. I can remember him blocking a punt against Alabama that put A&M in a position they didn't come back and win, but maybe come back and win. Cullen Gillaspia made big, pivotal plays, and he was on the field a lot.
All right, I understand. I think we're in agreement about a lot of things here.
Oh, if you wanted to say is Tyler White among the best? If you took A&M and you said, okay, who's the best based on being at their position? I'd say, well, obviously, Tyler White may be the best in the country at his position. Definitely has the ability. In fact, I'd say, if you were guessing, what player on A&M's roster has the best chance to win a national award for their performance. I would say the best chance to be a national award winner, the Ray Guy winner for the best punter, is Tyler White. I think he has a better chance to win that than, say, Will Lee to win the Thorpe Award. Or, throw one out, or the offensive line to win the Joe Moore Award, right? I think Tyler White has the best chance for a national award. I still don't think makes you one of the best 25 players, because to be one of the best 25 players, you have to play.
All right, so imagine this. Imagine this, OB. So you see, if you include kicker, punter, right? You're seeing like 24 players consistently get playing time.
If the offense is terrible and A&M ends up averaging about 8 or 9 to 10 punts a game, I might change my mind.
But if Tyler White gets drafted to the NFL, okay, and of these 24 players that consistently start, he's one of those guys that gets drafted. He's immediately, as seen from the NFL, has a value greater than those other players.
At his position.
Sure.
Braden Mann also made tackles. He not only punted. I remember Braden Mann knocking the dog snot out of a punt returner at South Carolina, and the guy fumbled. A&M recovered and went and scored. You know why?
Field position matters.
Field position mattered.
Let's get Nick Savage's thoughts on that. Let's go around the room and behind the glass to Nick Savage.
The only thing I've thought this entire time is Matthew Dawson is the only one that could probably fill an entire segment talking about a punter. So I'm here for it, and I'm excited for y'all to be in the host chairs today. And it's really a battle of wits between Luke Evangelist and Olin Buchanan.
Oh, that's a mismatch.
No, OB, he got a good one in earlier, and I know you heard it too. I saw you look at the camera. We'll talk about it.
He already forgot it.
Yeah, but I think the score's 1-0 Luke right now, so I'll be keeping tabs back here.
Thank you. And Nick, do you have a player, when you do your voting for 25 and 25, that maybe you think people are underrating a little bit? Maybe it's a guy we've already talked about. Do you have someone that immediately came to mind for you?
Yeah, and I think Matthew will jump on board with me here. Miles Davis, I think I've heard enough good things about him, and in the special teams plays that he made last year and some of the hits, I love a guy that plays in the secondary that's not afraid to come downhill and lay the wood a little bit. So I think he might contribute a little bit more than maybe we're expecting.
Hey, if peeing your pants is cool, then consider me Miles Davis.
I'm sorry, what?
You don't remember that quote?
What did you say?
If peeing your pants is cool, consider me Miles Davis from Billy Madison.
No, I didn't see it.
Oh, that's
such
such
Billy
a good
Madison?
one.
No.
Oh, Adam Sandler.
That's the quote that comes to my mind every time someone talks about Miles Davis.
You know what Miles Davis is?
No, I just know the quote.
So he was just bringing up a name Miles Davis for no reason?
Isn't
that the jazz musician, Miles Davis?
Probably. Spelled differently, though. So, but.
Yeah, I'll look it up when we go to a break.
We're relying on OB to. Okay, never. We'll look it up in the break. We'll get to the Angry Elephant News and Social Center and what Ambry Heath has for us later. But right now, we're going to hit a break. Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and this is the continuation of the Go Hour presented by The Warehouse at CC Creations. We're going to go to the Angry Elephant News and Social Center, where we find Ambry Heath, who also missed the memo that we were all wearing our maroon TexAgs shirts, but that's okay. Ambry, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so as we all know, SEC Media Days are coming up. Those dates are set for July 14th through 17th, and the SEC just released a full list of player reps for the 2025 Football Media Days. Texas A&M will be sending Willie III at defensive back, Armajay Reed Adams on the offensive line, and Taurine York at linebacker.
And you know what? I think that's about who I would send as well. You've got two captains, and you've got Will Lee, who is one of the vocal leaders of that defense and also a pretty entertaining guy to talk to as well. OB, that brings us to one of our next topics about SEC Media Days. You've been going to SEC Media Days longer than some interns here have actually been alive, with this being your 19th
This will be
consecutive
my 19th one. I hated every one of them.
Before we get into some of your stories from SEC Media Days, who are you looking forward to hearing from most this year?
Well, or intrigued.
Yeah, quite frankly, to be honest, Mike Elko, just because he's last, that means it's almost over. I think that as far as coaches go,
it's all the same guys from last year.
Yeah, I know, but the guys that are entertaining are Lane Kiffin. Like him or not, he's entertaining.
You watched.
Sam Pittman can be somewhat entertaining. It's going to be kind of a bittersweet time for me, though. It's not. It's actually it's bitter. On top of me not enjoying media days, one of my good friends passed away, and Bob Holton, the Arkansas Democrat, he was famous for being the guy that asked all the first questions to everybody. So that's going to be different. But who do I really want to hear? You just don't have the personality. I used to look forward to Steve Spurrier, because Steve Spurrier would say stuff like, well, I always liked playing Georgia early because you can count on them to have 2 or 3 or 4 players suspended. And we thought we were having a good year. We beat so-and-so early in the year, and then it turned out that, they only won 4 games, so that wasn't a big deal. And then, of course, Mike Leach was great. Britt Bielema, I remember one time I asked him, I said, Coach, considering your situation, your problems with A&M, you recently said, or maybe last year you said beating Texas was borderline erotic, so what would beating A&M be? He said, well, I've got a daughter now. But who,
What about topical things? Like I think Hugh Freeze is in a lot of trouble right now with how he's recruiting. I think he's going to have to answer a lot of questions.
I think one of the guys that is interesting to hear from will be Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly in Dallas last year said, this is year 3, and everywhere I've been, year 3 has been a great year. And it was all right for LSU, but it wasn't great. And he's coming into year 4. And I'm not saying that unless they just completely collapse, which they won't, they're going to be good. But unless they're a playoff team, you wonder if he doesn't go into next year on the hot seat, because LSU's not paying this guy $11 million or whatever it is to win 9 games. And they've actually tasted success and championships at a high level. And so, that might be interesting. I might write about that. It's always interesting to hear the coaches that are, actually on the hot seat. But the personalities aren't the same. You used to have some real characters. Kirby Smart is a great coach, but he's not going to tell you anything that's going to go, okay, man,
he was pretty fiery last year about, that all the stuff was going on at Georgia and, things were changing. He's pretty fiery about that stuff last year. But I don't know. I'm excited to hear about see what people are going to ask you, Freeze, because I think Auburn fans and media
I think,
are getting a little restless.
I think, they absolutely. Auburn, again, they fired a coach 1 year after winning a national championship, 2 years after winning a national championship. Gene Chizik won a national championship, 2 years later he was fired. They had Tommy Tuberville, Senator Tommy Tuberville. They had him like a year off an undefeated season, and they're talking to Bobby Petrino to replace him. I'm sure you remember that. Auburn is like the crazy ex-girlfriend. That's always doing insane stuff that doesn't make any sense. The whole thing with Brian Harston. They tried to create
like
stuff that all these things to do so he can fire him with cause, and he didn't do any of them. I mean, that happens at Auburn. So of course, Hughes Freeze was on the hot seat the day he was hired because it's Auburn, and this year, they think they've solved their quarterback problem with Jackson Arnold, who was apparently Oklahoma's quarterback problem. So Oklahoma's failure is Auburn's savior, right?
Yeah, well, I've seen so many articles too about them, Auburn solidifying that they have some sort of top 10 offensive line in the country, and I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure now if they...
You're placing both tackles.
Is their receivers really good? Yes, they got an excellent receivers room. But you're telling me how great their offensive line is. Just a year or two ago, their offensive line was like the group of 5 all-star team because everybody was from some group of 5.
Tulsa and Western Kentucky. It did not work.
Didn't work. So, that's interesting. But Hugh Freeze, I mean, there's a great personality.
Yeah. Well,
I just want to ask him about how much they let him use the credit card. What all can he use that credit card for? The company card.
Since they don't have maybe the personalities as head coaches, what about some players you might be looking forward to hearing from? I think for me, it's probably Diego Pavia. He's probably the most
he's made some
quotable,
things.
Entertainable, saying he doesn't know who Josh Payton is.
That's pretty interesting. And then he made some kind of, what was that crazy comment?
He said Vanderbilt was going to own the state of Tennessee.
But he said something else too, where that's pretty amazing. Remember when Clark Lee said Vanderbilt was going to be the best program in the country?
Look, they're on their way, right?
No. But they did beat Alabama.
They did do that. They kept most of the coaching staff as well. That's pretty impressive.
I got a friend on that recruiting staff over there, old Barton Simmons.
Oh, really?
From Rivals, former co-worker. The one
Isn't
guy.
He's the general manager, right?
Yeah, the one guy among the scouts and the recruiting rankers that I actually respected his opinion.
Well, he's done a good job.
Yeah, I would agree. Vanderbilt's on the come up for sure, and looking forward to hearing what Clark Lee and Diego Pavia have to say there at SEC Media Days. Right now, we're going to hit a break, and on the other side, we're going to talk some college football rivalries and get OB's thoughts on those. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers.
Hey everyone, David Nuno and Olin Buchanan and OB. Typically we start off the show in this section and we call it the Holistic Planning Cool
The cool zone, yeah. It's pretty cool.
What do we know about holistic planning?
Well, a lot of cool stuff. For instance, holistic planning can help you with your investments.
I love that.
They can help you with your taxes. So
I don't like paying taxes.
You can get that money from your investments and they keep it, they'll help you keep it away from the government.
Yep.
Not all of it, but more of it. And then they'll even help you with your estate planning. When you're old like me, You got to make sure some of that money you made is there for when you want to retire and just enjoy the rest of your life.
You want your estate to be planned. But they also do something else.
Yeah, well, if you are, like, say, a sports fan, and you've always wanted to...
Everybody watching us, right?
Yeah. And you want to always dream of being an owner, well, in a certain way you can, because they will broker the deal for you to invest in pro sports.
Yeah, what you need to do is check out investinprosports.com. That's where you can get all the information if you want to invest in a team. I don't know what team. He'd probably try to buy the Cowboys. I'd try to buy a lot of the Houston teams. Whatever it may be, investinprosports.com. It is holistic planning, and we love hanging out at the Holistic Planning Cool Zone.
Oregon State?
Nope.
Welcome into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and this is still the Go Hour, presented by The Warehouse at CC Creations. We've got a little segment that we want to dive into because The Athletic just put out their top 25 college football rivalries, and I think we've got some things to say about them. A&M and Texas made the list at number 15, and I think we both would have a hard time naming 14 rivalries more intense, more passionate than the Lone Star Showdown. But we can start at the top of that list with Michigan and Ohio State. I don't think we have any objections there, as that is the greatest college football rivalry.
I don't know if it's the greatest, but I wouldn't lose any sleep over them being ranked number 1.
I would probably say same with the Iron Bowl being 2.
That's right.
That's probably 1A, 1B.
That could be, yeah.
Are there any?
And then Texas, Oklahoma. Yeah, I have to admit that's and now, well, recently, I mean, those games have been nationally relevant. You know, a lot of times, you know, that game might decide who's going to play in the for a championship, not just conference championship, but a national championship. Even though one year Texas beat Oklahoma, and still Oklahoma went and played Florida for the national championship. Army, Navy, I guess. I mean, I know it's, yeah, I'm not going to.
I mean, it's a standalone game.
It is.
It is. It's a standalone. Not for like necessarily us, but like I would imagine. Just ask Roy May, you know, like what he thinks about that game. You know?
Yeah.
Do you agree with USC Notre Dame at 5, or do you want to put a different game in your top 5?
I don't know if I'd put. You know, I would be more apt to put Georgia, Florida.
Yeah.
Ahead of that one.
That one's at number 12.
Let me see what.
Alabama, Tennessee.
You know, I tell you,
the history of that game, at least, not like the last 5-10 years. I don't know what the criteria for this is. Like, is this like historically
if you want
all
just,
time?
Well, there's got to be like it's got to be. Like I see Oklahoma and Oklahoma State on this list 25. I can't put that on there because Oklahoma wins 80% of the time.
And they also don't play anymore now.
And now they don't play anymore. I think if you don't play anymore, I see Oklahoma and Nebraska's on this list. Oklahoma and Nebraska's played like twice in 20 years.
Right.
I you know, that to me, that would disqualify you.
Michigan,
which is also probably why Texas
do they have West Virginia and Pitt on here?
No. They don't.
See,
they don't even have the backyard brawl, or the Civil War, or the Holy War.
The nastiest. People don't know this unless you really know college football. I mean, and I'm talking about you know a bit more than you should, right? That like someone say, "Hey, go get a life, do something else." Maybe just the nastiest, just grossest, just you know, get the whole thesaurus out for nasty. Rivalry might be BYU and Utah. It is so contentious. They despise each other. BYU feels like they're better than Utah because if you were good in your faith, you would have gone to BYU. So we're better in our faith than you are. And Utah's like, wait, you can't say you're better than me because I didn't. And so they detest each other. And every game they go out, and the idea is that they're going to say, you know what? I'm more man than you are. But no, seriously, it is a nasty, you don't think of it because, you know, you don't look at Kyle Whittingham and think, oh man, what a jerk that guy is.
Yeah.
And I don't even know who
Kalani Sitake? No, I wouldn't say that about him either.
You know, and you just don't think of BYU and Utah as being this. Frankly, you go to BYU and you'll see some of the most orneriest fans that say some of the most questionable things. they're like Texas Tech with a mountain. That should definitely be on there. That's not on there. Like you said, West Virginia and Pitt.
I mean, they didn't play for a period of time there, so like if you're downgrading them because of that,
then you can't put some of these others on there.
Right, Texas A&M, like
Michigan,
that might
Notre
be
Dame.
Michigan, Notre Dame. Well, let me ask you this: as a Michigan fan, Luke, or at least you were growing up, like Michigan's on here 3 times, right? And I think like if you have like 3 different rivalries, like are you as passionate about every single one? Like is Michigan Notre Dame a more passionate rivalry?
Do they play every year? No.
No.
Now Michigan State. I was up in Ann Arbor one time. I can't remember what year it was, 07, 08, and I was talking to Braylon Edwards. He was a receiver with the Browns at that time, and he's come back to give a scholarship. And the scholarship was that I think he wore number 1 in college, and so that receiver had to wear number 1. And then they've actually gotten away from that, so he got mad, and I think he took the money back. But anyway, he talked about how everybody he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to a group of people, and he said, everyone talks about how much we hate Ohio State, and that's true. But we don't hate anybody like we hate Michigan State. I went, oh, that was interesting. Michigan State is the one. They actually hate Ohio State with a certain level of respect. They, much like, I think Aggies always hated Texas, but there was a certain level of respect because you've been good and you've done some things, but they really hated Baylor.
Yeah.
Right? Or Texas Tech. What am I saying? Let's face it, Aggies hate everybody. But they just detest Michigan State. And, there's that whole little brother thing, that, what was the running back, Michael, can't think of his name right now, about a 5'8" running back that was really good for Hart.
Mike Hart, yeah.
Mike Hart.
So a little bit shorter than me.
And he's, a little bit. I probably wasn't as smart as you either. But he was the one that said, Michigan State's our little brother, and that has stuck, and that's so that's underrated there.
I think also too, like college football rivalry is very different than like other sports rivalries. Like I think you could say like geographically, Texas and Texas A&M, like you have people like butting heads about like the academics of the school. Geographically, like you were living with Longhorns, you're living with Aggies. In Alabama and Auburn, like you got divorces, over that kind of thing. But I don't know, like, what are your qualifications, OB, or what are your?
Well, again, you've got to be. It's got to be a reasonable matchup. You can't have the rivalry like the hammer and the nail. There's a rivalry. No, it's got to be. It's got to be. The other, both teams have a reasonable amount of success against each other, and then it's got to be, it's got to be just nasty. You got to detest the other guy, and your fan base gets into it. I once read that I think it was Bo Schembechler used to ask his guys every day, "What'd you do today to beat Ohio State?" And it might be February. What did you do today to beat Ohio State? Where you live with it all year. That has to be the number one rivalry. And, I got to tell you something. Everybody knows I grew up a Texas fan, and then I grew up. But so Oklahoma was the game. Now, part of that was because A&M and Texas both teams were good at the same time. I mean, you can go back and look it up. I mean, there were times they were, but rarely both teams were good at the same time. And so you had a situation where Texas looked down at A&M and thought they were better, and A&M was, wanted to, I'll show you, and then, then A&M let women come in and started making some money, and the next thing you know, you're on the equal footing. And if you look at that rivalry since like 1970, Texas just took the edge during the Mack Brown years, but right before Mack Brown, I think it was either even since 1970, and also letting black players play. So the dominance changed. So I think it has to be one of those games that just touches so much emotion. I mean, there's emotion when LSU and Alabama. That's kind of nasty. And I think what really made that nasty was the whole Nick Saban deal. And then, he made that statement about there's a certain word that I'm not going to say it that's associated with Cajuns. And it's one of those words, if you say it, it depends on how you say it. Because they'll say.
You're an East Texan, so you're qualified to talk about this.
Well, I'm going to put it this way. If it's redneck, right? It's not redneck. That's not the word. People know what I'm talking about if you know anything about Louisiana. And if you say, "Hey, that old redneck," and you go, "Yeah, heck yeah, I'm a redneck," But if you say it in a certain way, then it's fighting words, right? And so there's a word down there, and Nick Saban used the word, and he wasn't allowed to anymore. And then you remember Les Miles getting drunk and said, "We're going to beat Howla effing Bama," and all that. And there's just a lot of nastiness. Now, if you want to look at a rivalry, if it's not on that list, they're not going to be playing all the time, but just the games year in and year out are classic, amazing games. LSU and Auburn. LSU and Auburn. Look up the history of some of the game in that series. It's insane. They even had a game they call the earthquake game because LSU won on the last play, and the reaction from the crowd moved the Richter scale that they had in in some seismology department there, which I'm shocked that LSU has a seismology program or whatever you call it.
Obi, quick thoughts on maybe one that's lower on that list that you think should be higher, like a Clemson, South Carolina, maybe an Egg Bowl.
Yeah. I don't know about the Egg Bowl. One time somebody, I wish I could use this for myself. It's probably right at 23. Somebody once said, if the Egg Bowl was played in my backyard, I'd draw the blinds. But Clemson and South Carolina is, you want to talk about, rednecks mad at each other. Man, that's a redneck extravaganza.
Yeah.
And they hate each other.
And that'll be a good game to watch this year with potentially two Heisman quarterbacks. Yep. So we're going to have a short segment on the other side of this break. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers, the final segment of the Go Hour, presented by The Warehouse at CC Creations. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. We're going to go to the Angry Elephant News and Social Center. Got about a minute left in this final segment. Ambry, do you have any text messages for us?
I don't have any text messages, but the SEC volleyball preseason poll is out, and Kentucky is on the top again for the 9th straight year. Texas came in second, A&M came in third, earning one first-place vote.
And
third. That's amazing considering where this program was just 2 or 3 years ago.
If there's a coach to buy stock in and a program to buy stock in outside of the big three and softball, we're going to include softball in that as well, it's got to be Jamie Morrison. And,
A&M has some good coaches.
Yeah.
And Jamie Morrison, what he's done is phenomenal. And hopefully they'll be even better than they were last year. And if they are, a national championship is not out of the question.
100%.
I'm going to go watch them.
Really?
Yeah. My niece played volleyball, so I got to go. And I thought, this is a better game than you might think. There's so much precision and speed and athleticism.
I used to play volleyball. Can you believe that?
Yeah, he was the
You're
ball.
libero?
Actually, in 8th grade, I was a hitter outside.
Really?
Yeah. Until,
How high was the net?
It was grade school net, so it's a little bit lower than
I
maybe
figured.
the one in high school. But in high school, they wanted me to play libero, and I was like, I think I like baseball better.
Huh.
Well,
They don't let girls play volleyball here in Texas.
Yeah, it's different for him up north. You learn something new every day about Matthew Dawson. Obi, thanks so much for joining us. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Matthew, I found it fitting that in the Go Hour we were talking about 25 and 25 and players who are high impact no matter how many times they touch the field. And OB mentioned very own Cullen Gillaspia, former 12th man. And I thought, okay, did OB look at the show rundown and know that we were going to have Cullen on? Or did he just say that because of how great of a player he was? And I think it was a little bit of both, because it was the perfect segue to go out to the Buppies Catering and Bartending Hotline and talk to the former 12th man from Texas A&M football, Cullen Gillaspia. Cullen, how are you doing?
I am doing good, fellas. I am happy to be here, ready to talk some Aggie football. I'm starting to get the itch, get excited for the season.
Yeah, we are too. It's great to have you on, as always, on TexAgs. I want to start off by saying it's great to have you, and can you tell the people kind of what you've been up to as of lately with your work?
Yeah, so I finished up my NFL career in 22 with the Seahawks. Got about halfway through the season, hurt my knee. I've since had about 5 surgeries since then. Had 2 years of what my mother liked to call fun employment. And about 6 months or about 8 months ago, I got into the oil and gas industry, started working for a Rhino valve company. So I sell oil and gas materials, pipes, valves, fittings, nuts, bolts, gaskets, whatever you need. That's kind of what I do now. I'm a salesman, and I'm learning a new industry, and I'm repping the merch. It's been good. It's been fun.
Is that a Max Crosby jersey in the back there? Is that a jersey swap?
That is a Max Crosby jersey. So Max and I trained together all of combine training. So we were out at Exos in Scottsdale, Arizona, and him and I became really good friends. And, we played each other week 3 or week 4 of our rookie year. And he was actually the first guy that I did a jersey swap with. So that's a rookie worn game jersey from Max Crosby. Kind of sucks because on the front is where he signed it, but I'm like, I kind of want you to be able to see the Crosby on the back. So one day I'll unframe it and look at the signature. But it's on there. I think the name's cooler to show.
So that's your best jersey swap that you've had. You don't have any other ones that you're.
I got all the Aggies you played. I've got multiple Armani Watts jerseys. I've got a Josh Reynolds jersey. A Jay Sternberger, a Kingsley Kiki, and a Taro Alaka. So I've pretty much all the Ags that I played throughout the NFL. We'd always do those swaps. But yeah, Max Crosby is definitely one of the cool ones, especially with his career path and how he's, a top 3-4 pass rusher in the NFL right now, and is quite literally the face of the NFL. Every time I watch a UFC fight, he's sitting there next to Dana White. I'm like, oh. This dude's on a different level of fame. I'm selling pipe, and this dude's on the front row on HBO specials. So it's pretty cool to have it up there.
Yeah, that is a great jersey to have. I wanted to ask you, when you're playing in the NFL, when you've got a full-time job, I know you love your A&M sports. How difficult is it to maybe keep up at the same level that you did when you were on the team or when you were a student, and stay locked in on A&M sports when you've got other responsibilities going on?
So when you're playing football, like in the NFL, you're not quite as in tune, because on Saturdays when the teams are playing, you're in and out of meetings all day. So it's a little different. It's harder to keep up quite a bit, and you've got so much on your plate with your team and what you're worried about. It's a lot of just talking trash in the locker room. I remember in 21 when we beat Alabama, we went into our nightly meetings, and we were up like 14-0, and I was playing for the Giants at the time, and it's a whole Southern staff, so there was probably 10 Alabama guys on the roster, and I can remember going into nightly meetings being up 14-0, thinking like, oh God, like we're gonna come out, just the battered Aggie syndrome, like we're coming out, we're gonna be down, like don't talk any trash, don't do anything, and then you come out of the meetings and you're getting your hot fudge sundae the night before the game, you're looking at them like, oh, we are up. Like it was one Aggie versus 10 Alabama guys, and even though I never personally beat them, it was sweet to sit there and look. I mean, half the staff had coached at Alabama, so it was a lot of fun. It was me with my guns out, looking at the entire team. But post-grad and post-NFL, now that I have a job, I am way more invested. I always tell people, like, you can imagine how passionate I was on the field as a player. A loss as a fan who lives and breathes it now, it's almost worse being a fan when we lose. And it's better when we win. To that back, wins are better as a player. Worse is our loss as a fan. Like I'm so bought in. It hurts. It'll ruin an entire week, which I think most of Aggies deal with.
I think everyone listening to the show would agree with exactly what you just said. I also know that you're locked in because about a month ago, you tweeted, feeling, a lot of E's right there, like the Aggies win 10 games this year. All right. Something must have come up or some thought process led you to making that claim or making that opinion or thought. What is it about this A&M team that you feel like they can maybe win 10 games?
I think this is the first year where we haven't come in with like the hype that we should be the number one team in the country, and that it's playoffs or bust. That's kind of been the mindset the last few years with the recruiting classes that they've come through. I think that's pretty hard to do with a changing quarterback and how much that room is rotated. I think that we return 15 starters, the entire offensive line. I've been a Marcel Reed believer since day one. I think another year in Colin Klein's offense and them starting to gel together of figuring out what Marcel does best and how to call plays best for him. I think Colin Klein got better at that as the season went on. Our defense, I think year two under Elko, I think the secondary is going to improve. I think our D-line, we're returning Cassius Howell, who was arguably the most productive player on the D-line. I mean, he had 100 less snaps than Nick Scorton and was, second in sacks on the team. Like his production is off the charts. I think Torian York, I think he is, he's immeasurable for what he does for this team and just in terms of what on the field, but also off the field and his leadership. It's very admirable to watch how he plays. I just think you got a lot of people returning. You got a lot of recruiting. I think it was mostly the recruiting momentum, to be honest with you. Like we can break down stats and like really get into the weeds on it, but I've just been watching Elko put on a clinic of what he's done this summer, and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. It was last season hurt when it ended, and then we in the group chat we decided we weren't going to talk about Aggie football for about 3 to 4 months. We're going to let it die, focus on basketball, focus on baseball. Now we're in the dog days of summer, and the hype train's starting to go up. The boys are starting to drink the Kool-Aid, and I just had to get it out there.
And you know what? Summer is the best time to be drinking Kool-Aid because it keeps you fresh. And we've got a question from Travis on the YouTube chat. He wants to know how you feel about the toughness and togetherness of this team. Elko has really tried to reinvigorate that culture of A&M of playing like an A&M team, playing tough and playing together for all 4 quarters. What have you seen from the team last year that gives you some hope that that kind of culture is coming back to A&M football?
Well, first of all, I'd like to shout out my boy Travis. I know he's in the chat. He actually put in the group text that he was trying to get the chat active before we got on here.
He is getting it active, by the way.
I'm also seeing his dad texted me, so I'm assuming his dad on here. Big Ernie's on here as well. But, I think that the biggest thing that we've seen with Elko is you're not hearing, crazy stories coming out of the locker room of people getting in trouble. I think he's really done a good job of developing the culture and improving on the leadership that he had when he came in. I think he came in with some solid guys. Again, I really do respect Torian York as a player and as a leader. And I think Marcel as well, as he grows into, farther into his career. I think that there's not a lot of talk, not a lot of show, and they've kind of, as Elko has grown, they have grown with him, and I really think they're bought into the program. A lot of what I hear when I speak to guys that are around the program is just accountability. The word accountability. I think players are holding each other accountable, and it's fun to watch. I think they grew together last year. I don't think last year turned out the way that they wanted, but it seems to they seem to be improving as a unit and be a little more hungry. I mean, Marcel's Instagram post with the locations was, I mean, those are high aspirations, but if you're thinking like to do those things, you have to believe in yourself that you can do those things. So I'm excited to watch him grow. I'll for sure be coming around during training camp and checking it out. I know Elko's not scared, and I know he's hungry, and I know that he's on the boys right now. So.
Yeah, got to be hungry, especially if you want to get to that 10-win mark, like we talked about earlier. I don't know if you know this, Cullen, but you were actually on the last Texas A&M team to win a ranked game on the road back in 2014. You were a freshman, walk on there. So one, maybe you can comment, how tough it is to win those ranked games on the road in the SEC, and then also, like, if you're going to get to that 10-win mark, you're going to be playing teams like Notre Dame, you're going to be playing LSU, you're going to be playing Texas, like all on the road, right? So you gotta find a way to win those really important games on the road. What does it take to do that? And you think that this staff and these players can do it?
Was that game in 2014? Was that the South Carolina game?
You guys did it twice that year, South Carolina and then Auburn late in the year.
Gotcha. So for that South Carolina game, I was going through Rush, sitting in a fraternity house, drinking Miller Lights.
Yes.
So while I was on the team, I was just cheering on the team. And for that Auburn game, I was deer hunting my deer lease with J.J. Gustafson. And I don't know if that's a reach, but he was an offensive lineman, one of my good buddies. So both those games I watched on the TV as a walk-on. I wasn't on that travel squad as a freshman. But to win those games on the road, I personally love, feeding off that environment when you have the fans and they're screaming back at you. And as I think many people saw, my antics on the field were always a little more outgoing. So I was always trying to engage the other team's fans and talk to trash. We play in some hostile environments and are got a pretty tough road schedule this year. I think that's where you start banding together as a team and you find your toughness that they're talking about. The accountability, the toughness, that will to win has to come from within the team. You're not feeding off the stands, you're not feeding off the crowd, you're not feeding off the energy of Kyle Field. Those are great things, but I think the noise factor on the road, I think a lot of people, it's hard, but like teams, you prepare for that. And fans have a big impact on the game. It's just, when you're on the road, you have to find it from within your team. Like you can't focus on the surrounding area. And I'm hoping, I don't think, it hasn't been a flashy offseason outside of the recruiting front. Like I think that these guys are really looking inward to become the best team that they can be. And that's about what I would say on that.
Yeah, you overlapped with Coach Elko during your senior season, and it was his first season as the defensive coordinator here in 2018. What do you remember about the way he carried himself in 2018 and how he was in the locker room and with the team that year? And are you at all surprised to see him now, just 7 years later, the head coach in the same spot?
No, absolutely not. The intensity that he carried and the way that he connects with his guys, I think you see time and time again when he was a defensive coordinator of, former players, Buddy Johnson, Leon O'Neal, Ataro Alaka. Everyone's always talking about those Elko second half adjustments, Elko second half adjustments. It's the way that his players respected him and want to play for him, and the way that he can communicate with them is very, it's special. It's special. And I spent about 3 days on the defense before they switched me over to offense. So Coach Elko and I's relationship was a little more personal than it was, coach and player, considering I was, getting, coached by the offensive staff more. But I know that there's a deep respect for the players that play for him and the way that he coaches. I think year two in the system with, a couple of the guys, or, a quarter of the team being under him when Jimbo was there, knowing what was kind of going on and what they were coming with. But I think now after a year in the system and then being able to see how he works, gelling with, again, like Marcel and Colin Klein, gelling with Coach Elko's offense, and more particularly the secondaries. That's, Elko's a secondary guy. Them gelling together, I expect to see pretty big improvements across the board. I think that just happens naturally as coaches and players grow together and progress.
college football is changing significantly. Like in the last month, we've seen the House settlement go through. We're seeing like monetary compensation for players. But like one of the big things that, came out of that is roster limits, right? Like Texas A&M last year had about 143 players on their roster, and now they're going to have to limit roster sizes to only 105. Granted, these are full scholarship players, but as a walk-on yourself, like that seems pretty significant, right? I mean, in your eyes, like what did being a walk-on mean to you? Like, and what is that going to be like taking it away from a lot of these college programs?
I totally agree. I can remember, I'm not too privy on the details of how this has changed over the past few years, but I can remember going into training camp as a freshman walk-on. It was a big deal for me because I made, I believe what they called was the 105 or the 110. So only like 105 players or 110 players. I think it was the 105. I made the 105 roster, which meant only 105 players could go to training camp. And I remember, some of my walk-ons that I had grown close with over that first summer of training didn't get that training camp invite. So I am not exactly sure how there was 140 guys on the team. I'm not exactly sure how many were on the roster when I was there. From what I recall, I feel like it was only like 85 scholarships. I'm not sure can they go up to 110 scholarships now?
105 is the number that they're throwing around, scholarships. And I think that's also just the roster limit too. Like you're not allowed to have more than that even in.
Yeah. I mean, if you're scholarshiping 110 guys, I mean, I think it goes both ways. Being a walk-on, you have a chip on your shoulder. You get to go, hey, I'm not getting paid for school here. You're basically a glorified hitting dummy for a year. And then you go into spring training and you're like, oh yeah, like I'm playing with the ones, I'm playing with the twos, I'm getting some time. And then the new recruit comes in and you get, and so there's definitely, it breeds a certain sort of grit about you, knowing that like, hey, if you're going to stick it out, like it's going to be tough. That also said, if, it went from 85 scholarships and they're going to bump it up to 110 scholarships, there's quick math, 25 guys on the team who are going to get scholarships that, were probably your walk-ons. Me being a preferred walk-on, I would assume I was, right out of that list of guys across the country who weren't getting the massive Division I offers. So there's a trickle-down aspect where more guys will get scholarships out of high school, and it'll open up the playing field a lot more. But it'll be tough. Or, maybe your teams will do, hey, we're going to do 100 scholarship guys, then we're going to offer 10 scholarships to walk-ons. Like, I don't exactly know what the future is or how it's going to work. It's a weird thing to talk about. I'm curious how it relates to the 12th man. As I was 2 years of walk-on. My last 3 years I was on scholarship. I would be curious to see how they're going to carry that tradition and how that will change. Maybe hey, we're going to have 109 scholarships and we're going to hold one scholarship for a walk-on that tries out. I don't know how that looks, but I could see that changing that landscape.
Cullen, before we let you out of here, you mentioned being outgoing on the field, and I would definitely say you've carried that over to being outgoing on Twitter and how you follow A&M sports. Do you have a favorite outside of football that when they're on, like you got to watch, you got to tweet about it and kind of react to what's going on, if you've got a favorite sport outside of football to watch?
Outside of football, I'd say it's a lot of I would say I'm more casual on the college baseball and college basketball in terms of how fanatic some of my friends are. I'm catching the big games. I'm watching them. I loved watching the baseball team this year. I know the season didn't turn out how we wanted to, but I'm really getting locked in, like in the postseason this year, watching the basketball team when they're hitting the playoffs, not the playoffs, March Madness, excuse me. Playoff baseball is great. Seeing them in March Madness is one of the best things in the tournament. And I will catch a baseball game or a basketball game a week, but to say I'm in the weeds as I am with football, with those sports would be grasping at straws there. But yeah, I just think postseason any of their sports is great to watch. It's super exciting. It's fast paced. It's awesome.
Absolutely.
Heck, I was in Greece last year on my fun employment before I got a job, and legitimately almost flew from Greece to Omaha, Nebraska to go and watch the baseball game. I ended up, the flight change was a little bit pricey to fly there, so I ended up not making the trip, and I'm glad that I didn't because I didn't want to experience that. But I definitely keep up with all the sports in the postseason, so it's been good.
Absolutely, and that's good to hear. And want to thank you again for making time for us. That's Cullen Gillaspia, the former 12th man. Always great to have you on TexAgs. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
100%. So we're going to go ahead and hit a break. And on the other side, we're going to talk a little Aggie basketball. Maybe they're going to be making another run to March Madness. We'll go ahead and dive into some starting five, some thoughts from what I've seen in practice. But that's TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Before we talk some Aggie basketball, we're going to go around the SEC really quick, presented by Jack Sir. And we've got Ambry Heath at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center, who's going to give us a topic to discuss.
Yeah, so I have all of the SEC media days pulled up and what teams will be there. So Monday, July 14th, it's LSU, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. Tuesday, July 15th, Auburn, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas. Third day, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma. And the last day, Arkansas, Kentucky, Missouri, Texas A&M. So I wanted to throw that list out there and kind of see y'all's thoughts on who you're most excited for and to hear from.
And that Wednesday is like the day of
the
warm
hot seat.
seats, like hot seats. You got the Kalen DeBoer, Billy Napier, Jeff Levy, and the Brent Venables. That's going to be an interesting day. A lot of questions are going to be coming out of those, especially, Billy Napier, their over-under win total, I think, is like 7.5 this year. Like, it's a lot. And they got probably one of, if not the toughest schedules in the entire country, again, after having that same thing last year.
Yeah, I would say probably Monday with, that's probably the most personalities you're going to see from coaches with Brian Kelly, Lane Kiffin, Shane Beamer, and Clark Lee. But either way, it'll be exciting to follow along. But I think if there's a most quotable day, or a day where you're going to get the most sound bites to react to, it's probably on Monday with those teams and Shane Beamer and Lane Kiffin accounting for most of them.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. Before we wrap this segment up, we're going to go into some Aggie basketball because when we have Aaron Torres on in the next segment, we're definitely going to be asking him about A&M basketball, a team that he's been following along with all of the offseason additions. And now, over the last month and a half, I've been at practice and been able to watch it kind of come together. So we're going to discuss maybe like hypothetical starting fives from what I've seen at summer workouts. And then Matthew's got a starting five as well.
A less informed starting five that Luke will comment on probably.
Yeah, probably. My starting five for the summer is different because it's going to be not necessarily position-based, but more so in the standouts that I've seen. Just kind of my 5 best players that I've been most impressed with. And that's going to be Josh Holloway starting at point guard. And the main reason for that is he's really impressed me. On tape, he looked athletic at Samford, playing against SoCon talent. But in the first month, he still looked really athletic against a lot of guys that were coming from power conference teams. So Josh Holloway, for me, is going to be starting at the 1. Marcus Hill will be at the 2. A lot of what you saw at NC State, I think he's a much better fit in this system. Him only shooting, I think, like less than
from 3.
Yeah, like he was a really bad 3-point shooter at NC State. I have not seen that at all in practice. He's actually been pretty spectacular. But then again, who isn't on this team? Everyone on this team can shoot threes. He's really physical as well, which I think they're going to need in that guard room with a lot of guys who were between 6 foot and 6'2". He's really physical even at 6'2", but he's listed at 6'4". He's not actually 6'4". Sorry to spoil that. My next 2 guys are going to be Rylan Griffin and Mackenzie Mbako, 2 guys who you're coming into the season, you already know they're going to be 2 of your best players, but they've really put that on display so far in these summer workouts. Just dominant. They can get a shot off whenever they want to. They can score pretty much whenever they want to. Rylan Griffin earlier this week had one of the best practices I've seen from anyone. He just couldn't miss from 3. And when he's hot like that, he's one of the best shooters, not just on the team, but in the SEC. So he showed me a lot of what I saw from him at Alabama, and then also from watching him at Richardson in high school. And then finally, Rashawn Agee is going to be at the 5. And that's not to say that Federico, who's probably going to end up being your starting center, hasn't been impressive, but he's only had 1 day of practice. Agee has been here just a tad bit longer. And from the moment that he got here, he was that vocal leader that I think the team needed in the front court. Not only is he 6'8", on a team with a lot of guys who are 6'11", but he's over 220 pounds. He's just a really big guy that they needed because this team has height, but they don't necessarily have size and weight and mass. But Agee brings that mass. He's a super physical shot blocker. He's a really entertaining personality. I think hopefully his waiver gets approved because not only will A&M fans want to see him on the court, but you're going to want to hear from him off the court. He's one of the funniest guys on the team right now. Reminds me a lot of Solomon Washington with how much trash he likes to talk. All friendly, though. All friendly trash talk. but also just how he gets his teammates involved off the court. And then my sixth man would be Ruben Dominguez. Not really much to say other than he might be one of the best shooters the Reed Arena Rims have ever seen with the way that he shoots it from three. Matthew, I know you've got a starting five that you want to throw out there.
Well,
as
I guess to preface, that's your summer workout starting five. That's not what you think is going to be the day one starting. And I think like this lineup, you got so many combinations of things, right? You talked about like Rashawn Agee. Like you're going to need like a third big in that lineup, right? And Josh Holloway was a guy that didn't start at Samford until like late in the year, right? Like he had maybe the fourth most minutes on their team at Samford, but he only started in like 11 games. So like even if Josh Holloway's not starting, necessarily at the one, like he's going to be coming in, he's going to be playing a lot. And he's comfortable with coming off of the bench. Fascinated with how they use Marcus Hill, kind of like how you were talking about, but I kind of see him coming more off the bench potentially, but I got Pop Isaacs, Dominguez at the 2, Riley Griffin 3, Mbako and Federico. But that's subject to change. And I think like we're going to see through the beginning of the year, you're going to see a lot of different combinations of lineups and see what he sticks with come conference time.
100%. I would say your starting lineup is a lot more what I would see when the season begins. The only reason I haven't had Pop, Isaacs, or Federico in there is Pop is working his way back from that hip injury, and so he hasn't been a full participant in practice. He's just now getting back to non-contact work. And then Federico has only been here practicing for 2 days. But I believe that what you just threw out there is a lot more what you'll be seeing from me and from other people that cover this team in terms of starting lineup projections in October or November. The only thing I would say is probably a question mark is who's at the 2 between Marcus Hill and Ruben Dominguez. But either way, if Dominguez is starting or if he's your sixth man, he's going to play a ton. And I think he's going to be a lot like Caleb Grill from Missouri last year, who he's in contention for sixth man of the year in the SEC. And that's because he's going to be shooting probably 6-7 threes a game
at 40%,
at 40 to 45%. And he's going to be a high impact guy who, just because he's not starting doesn't mean he's not one of their better players. And that's the thing about this lineup you mentioned.
That was cute.
So much flexibility with how many pieces they have.
That was cute, coming off the bench. I mean, he was the bucket getter of that team.
Yeah.
He came off the bench.
And instead of a team having just 1 or 2 bucket getters, I think A&M fans will be happy to see, let's just say, up to 10 guys on this team that can get you a bucket at any time. And we're going to hear more from a national perspective from Aaron Torres talking college basketball and college football when we go around college football and college basketball next in this segment. This is TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We are inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and now it is time to go around college football and college basketball, which is brought to you by Milliken Reserve. And we've got our good buddy, Aaron Torres of Fox Sports Radio on the Buppies Catering and Bartending Hotline. No David Nuno today, but he's taking one of those vacations, but we are still blessed to talk to Aaron Torres, who's going to give us his thoughts on SEC Media Days for football, maybe a little college basketball talk, and whatever questions we have for him. AT, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Good. I'm told that there's phone issues, so I'm just not trying to talk too loud, not trying to talk too quietly, just trying to, talk just right,
Yeah, the technical gods have blessed us with a great start to this interview, and we don't have to get you on Zoom or scramble to find things out. I want to start and get your thoughts on SEC Media Days coming up next week. Is there a team or player or coach you're looking forward to hearing from most that maybe has the most questions to answer about their upcoming season?
Well, I think the obvious answer is Arch Manning. And I get, he wasn't a starter, so he just hasn't done much media availability. And I'll be curious to hear his takes on the season ahead, being the starter, this and that. I think two big picture kind of conversations that I think are going to be interesting. It's funny, I was on with Nuno's buddy Ryan Fowler yesterday, and we talked a little bit about this. Is anyone going to acknowledge that maybe the SEC has been caught a little bit in this sport of college football, at least by the top of the Big Ten? You can deny it, you can pretend it's not happening, but obviously no SEC team playing for a national championship 2 years in a row, the Big Ten winning the last two national championships. I think the top part of the Big Ten has caught up to the SEC. I still think the middle and the bottom is tougher. I think it's tougher on a week-in, week-out basis to walk into a bottom-tier SEC, facility like Tennessee losing to Arkansas, Kentucky losing or Ole Miss losing to Kentucky at home than it is in other leagues. But I still think it's a conversation. Is anyone going to acknowledge it? Because at spring meetings, Greg Sankey seemed to think it was par for the course, and I think the direct quote that he gave was, "Nobody does it like us," and I don't know that you could say that anymore. And then I think the other thing that I'm just kind of curious about is, how does the media polling go? Because I look at the SEC and, I think there's about 4 or 5 teams that you can make a legitimate case for are the best team in the SEC. And I think even at the top of the league, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, all breaking in new starters. LSU, yes, Garrett Nussmeier's back, but almost an entirely new offensive line and receiving core. I just bring it up. There's a lot of questions at the top of the league, and I'm just curious, our peers, how they view this league, because I do think it's about as wide open as I can remember it.
Yeah, I agree. This is Matthew, by the way, co-hosting with Luke. When you're looking at the odds to win the SEC, I think too with conference expansion, right? Like the way you finish in terms of the standings in the SEC also maybe has a lot to do with your schedule. Like I look at Auburn, sure they got Alabama and Georgia that they got to play, but they also draw Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri. I mean, those are some schools that you want to draw, right? So I think that's going to have a lot to do with that. But to your point, the quarterback situation in the SEC, and I think that also reflects too, and how the SEC's performed out of conference and then the college football playoffs. There may be a significant quarterback problem that could lead to possible turmoil in this SEC season.
Well, it's fun. First of all, to go to the scheduling thing, I think it's really funny. I was talking to a Florida fan the other day, and he was talking about, he's obviously, Tennessee's one of their historic rivals. He says, compared to Tennessee, Tennessee's got the easiest schedule. And it's then you look at Tennessee's schedule, at Florida, at Bama, Georgia at home. It's maybe it's not quite so easy, So that speaks to, again, I think the depth of this league. But I think to your guys' point, and I think this is one of the unintended consequences of this massive realignment that we've seen, where you have 18 teams in the Big Ten, 16 teams in the SEC. I'll be transparent. I don't even know if I know off the top of my head quite how many teams are in the ACC. I think it's 17 for football, 18 for everything else. Is you just get such imbalanced schedules. And I think this year, as I prepare I'm looking more into that because the bottom line is there is going to be another Indiana. Who is that? I don't know yet, but there's going to be somebody that probably isn't one of the 8-10 best at-large candidates that's just going to have a resume that reflects they should be in the field. Tennessee again last year. Were they actually the third best team in the SEC? I don't know, but they didn't play Texas. They didn't play A&M. They didn't play LSU. They took advantage of getting Alabama and Florida at home. So I just bring it up because I think that schedules more than anything are going to play an important role. And it's also really quickly why I think the league is so up for grabs. Like you look at Texas where, about as manageable of a schedule as you could have had last year. Well, now all of a sudden they got to go to Florida and to Georgia, among other places. So it's a fascinating byproduct of all of this conference expansion that I don't think enough of us considered at this time last year is the imbalanced schedules, and it's something that I'm looking at pretty, with a keen eye here in 2025.
Even with the schedule imbalance that you mentioned, one thing will be on your schedule no matter what year it is that rivalry week. We've spent the first part of the show talking about some of our favorite rivalries, some of the most intense rivalries. Do you have a top 3 most intense rivalries for college football and then also for college basketball?
Yeah, observing, your guys' bosses, Billy and David and, Gabe Bach formerly, I think from a distance you can see the hatred with Texas A&M of, Billy could speak to this better than I can, but, they weren't even in the same league for 10 years, and I saw Texas fans tweeting at Billy seemingly every single day. So I would have to put that in the short conversation. I'll say this, one that's on the pseudo West Coast that I don't think that I realized how intense it was that I think the last year or two I've kind of noticed. I'll just throw out a random one. I'm not saying it's top 1, top 2, top 3, but BYU and Utah really hate each other. And I don't know that I fully knew it because it's kind of like the Texas A&M thing. They were in the same conference. They weren't in the same conference, and maybe they were never in the same. Whatever. They played. They didn't play for a while. I will tell you this is that I think there was some vibes of Texas A&M, Texas from the perspective of we know that Texas A&M sort of, I don't want to say tried to block, but maybe wasn't happy with Texas coming into that league. And I know that once BYU got to the Big 12, they weren't excited to share that conference with Utah. And with BYU, I think really having success in football and basketball over the last calendar year, I think that I've just seen in my mentions and in some things I see on social media about, those two fan bases really don't like each other. So, again, I'm not ready to say it's better than Texas A&M, Auburn, Alabama, things like that. But I do think there's some real hatred there. Give a little shout out to the West Coast, the Big 12, for a rivalry that I think probably doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Holy War is just completely underrated and not enough people talk about just how much hatred there is. And you can really see it in football over the last couple of years. I want to flip to college basketball real quick. I try and wrap my head around what is happening in this sport, and I cannot find one good reason to expand the NCAA tournament. And it seems like there is a push, and we know why. We know what the money involved would be to expand a product that I think has already found its maximum teams, the maximum number of teams that make the product enjoyable and interesting and meaningful to be a part of. What is the latest on NCAA tournament expansion, and is there any reason why this could actually benefit the sport?
Great, complicated question. I'll try to be as brief as I can. I know we're up against the hard break, so if I'm going long, feel free to cut me off. Yes, I think that this is a decision is going to be made in the next 36 hours. There's so many meetings of different working groups and leadership groups that, it's hard to keep track of them all, but there are meetings right now about a couple issues in the world of college basketball, but the only one that impacts every single fan is potential tournament expansion. I think for people who haven't followed, could go to 72, could go to 76. It would involve more play-in games on that Tuesday, Wednesday. NCAA doesn't like us calling them play-in games. I'm sorry, they're play-in games. And to your guys' point, the answer is no. There is no good logical reason to to expand this tournament. You know, the SEC, as an example, we know got 14 teams in last year. The Big Ten had 7, 8, 9, something like that, about half of the league. The Big 12 had more than half of its league. And so, you know, you just sit there and say, you know, it's for greedy reasons, it's for selfish reasons, it's to get more power conference teams in, to make more power conferences money. And I think the funny part about it is, and by the way, the only people that benefit are the administrators, the ADs, you know, coaches that are trying to keep their jobs from being mediocre. But it's actually the fans that are really pushing back on this. And I'll just be brief on this, but I find it funny. You know, I was somebody that on the football side, I was not in favor of expansion, okay? But I understand that I was in the minority, and it does help schools like we mentioned, Tennessee, Indiana. You know, Indiana would have never made a 14 playoff, whatever. I don't think I know I'm not in the minority on this. I know I'm in the vast majority on this. And so I think, you know, you guys framed it well, is that, you know, that when that bracket is set with 64 teams going into that first Thursday, it's about as perfect of a sporting event as we have. And I just don't know why we would screw it up. I think at this point, and again, I'll try to be brief here, I don't even think the TV partners want it. I don't, you know, the play-in games on Tuesday and Wednesday aren't some huge moneymaker for Turner and CBS. And again, the only people that want it are the Big 12 and Big 10 that could potentially get more teams, SEC, et cetera. And I just think it's so stupid. And again, just to be brief on this, is that, you know, I don't know. It's so dumb. It makes no sense. It's not what anybody wants. And I hope somehow, some way it doesn't happen, even though I hate to say it, I think it's inevitable.
AT, thank you so much for joining us. I 100% agree with you on that. Do not expand the NCAA tournament under any circumstances. And let's hope that somehow, some way, they rule not to. Always great talking to you, and I really appreciate you joining us, even though you don't get to talk to your good friend David Nuno.
Well, tell him next week, I know he's going to be rubbing elbows with Greg Sankey, that he needs to throw his body in front of NCAA tournament expansion. So you let Nuno know that unless he talks Greg Sankey out of it, he's going to have beef with me next time I chat with him. But I appreciate you guys. I know you got to run. Thank you. Tell David to text me. I know media days gets a little hectic, so hopefully I talk with him next week. But I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. We appreciate you as well. That's Aaron Torres on the Buppies Catering and Bartending Hotline. We're going to come back with an open segment on the other side of this break. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers in the Rollo Insurance Studio. Real quick segment before we hit Brawny on the other side of this 9 o'clock hour break. We just want to talk a little bit about Aggies in the Summer League. I've got a running thread on the premium boards for Quentin Jackson, Dexter Dennis, Wade Taylor, and Zurich Phelps, who are all competing in the Summer League. All 4 are in action today for their first games in Las Vegas, so you can tune in to watch Dexter Dennis play the Lakers on ESPN. Quentin Jackson will be playing the Cavs on NBA TV at 4. Wade will be playing the Nuggets at 8:30, and then Zurich and the Mavs taking on the Lakers. So be sure to tune in to support those guys and follow along on the running thread. And that's it for this hour of TexAgs Live. We're going to speak to Brawny and the Fan Show in the next hour. We're taking it easy with Ryan Brauninger.
Absolute D-slapper right there.
And the segues are the most difficult part about posting video.
Well, it's always good to have you, TexAgs, baseball analyst, recruiting analyst. He wears a lot of hats. and he's currently wearing one right now. If you couldn't see his face, that's 2 already for those keeping track at home. Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented
it's like
by
Olin
David
got out
Gardner's
of here,
Jewelers.
and you're like, okay, now the witty one is gone. Now I can start firing my jokes off.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
Hey, how was he this morning? Was he behaved?
Yeah, you could say behaved.
I mean, he was with me on Wednesday. Yeah, yesterday morning, it was off the rails. We had to go to a commercial. We had to cut one of the segments short because he made a comment that it was like, all right, we're going to go to break, and if we may not come back. So we'll see.
Well, look, the over-under short jokes was 3.5, and the under hit. So those of you who had
In a
that
shocking
out there,
turn of events, something about height and Matthew Dawson, the under hit.
I know. I
did
money.
hear the first one about, you did a good job of kept talking because he was going to make a length joke.
Yeah.
He was. And he
I know,
looked
I
right
looked
at
at
me.
him. He looked right at me. I'm like,
That's good because you can see those wheels turning as soon as that toxic brain starts firing. You know it's about to come out. So it's a good job that you kind of talk through it.
see, like I think you have good witty comebacks too. It's just most of that's done in the lobby. Like you're a lobby lizard. So like when you're in that chair out there, like
maybe they should bring that chair in here. I'd be a lot more comfortable.
Well,
of course, Nick would be pissed. But Nick's always pissed.
No, don't say that about Nick Savage.
His mom texted in yesterday. I wonder if Nick knows that. He doesn't have his ears in. Did you know that, Nick? I believe your mother texted in yesterday.
Yeah, you're trying to get me in trouble.
I got him in trouble.
Oh, you got him in trouble?
Yeah, I talked about his caffeine.
I'm 26 and
where
I
it was
still get
coming
in
from.
trouble.
Well,
it's my fault, Nick. Hand up. It's on me.
That's on him. Well, we got you in here. So can we talk about this big recruitment going on today?
Yeah, Lamar Brown is going to make a decision at 12:30. If you've not been on the site, it would be a great time to be a subscriber to TexAgs. Jason had an update from around the 8 o'clock hour this morning, and Billy came in and dropped his thoughts like, what was it, maybe 15, 20 minutes ago?
Yeah.
So I do not want to put out breaking information or new information to the masses whenever we have it for our subscribers first, and it's being so new. What I will say is this is pretty genuinely down the middle, even on the day of, and you don't feel that very often. Like usually by now, one side or the other has gotten extremely confident, and I just don't think we're there yet. Now, I'm not saying that either A&M or LSU can't get a phone call while I'm on air and they finally say, hey, y'all are going to be the pick. I just don't think that's occurred yet. And so I think everybody's in the dark on this deal. Billy's got a lot more in-depth breakdown on the site right now. But if you're asking me, it's still worth tuning into because there's still a lot of intrigue about which hat he's going to put on. And I think the only definitive thing that we've got so far is that it's down to A&M and LSU.
And this has been kind of one of the biggest recruitments of this cycle so far, but he's not the only 5-star that A&M has either been in the mix for or already gotten signed.
No, and this isn't a make or break recruitment for A&M in this class. It'd be incredible to land him because you look at all of the factors that go into recruiting a guy like Lamar Brown and how often that kid does go to LSU. It's got to be 99% of the time that take the name out of it, just insert 5-star from Baton Rouge that LSU really wants. They usually do. The Tigers usually went out for that type of kid. So A&M, because of the job they've done elsewhere in the recruiting class, this isn't like the class could crumble or it could skyrocket it to levels unforeseen. Like A&M is amongst the best classes that they've ever had committed right now. So this would just be another cherry on top. And you mentioned it, Luke, like they are still in on a handful, I'll say a handful, close to a handful of like nationally elite targets. And I put out some notes this morning on 3 of those. Again, this is kind of new info, so I want to encourage people to subscribe if you want the latest in this type of stuff. So I'm interested because at this stage, in recruiting, when you have a big time decision like this, it's not often that we are on the day of and we don't have any kind of inkling which way thing's leaning. So I'll be tuned in just like everybody else at 12:30.
And every recruitment is different. Every circumstance, every person, every family, every coach, it's all different. But it's not unprecedented for us to go into Baton Rouge and get talent. I mean, one of Texas A&M's best offensive skill players last year's hails from Baton Rouge.
Yeah, Le'Veon Moss. You look at, Edrin Cooper was coming out of Covington, Louisiana, which is closer to New Orleans. But typically when you go back and look at A&M's success rate in the state of Louisiana, it's not been a bunch of head-to-heads against LSU. Le'Veon Moss was committed to Alabama before he flipped to A&M, and LSU kind of got involved late, but not really. With Lamar Brown, it's more like a Speedy Noyle situation where A&M did win out for Speedy out of New Orleans because LSU was making a huge push from day one. A lot of the best players that have come to Texas A&M out of the state of Louisiana were not like the most highly coveted kids in the state in that class. Edgerrin Cooper was committed to Oklahoma before A&M was able to flip him. Donovan Wilson had hardly any offers when A&M was able to go in there. Same thing with Jonathan Stewart. Those are both North Louisiana type of kids. You go all the way back to Bucky Richardson.
Yeah.
Bucky wasn't a highly sought-after guy by LSU. He comes to A&M as one of the best quarterbacks in school history. So A&M's done well in Louisiana and had some big hits that, on Saturdays at Kyle Field. But on the recruiting front, been few and far between where they've gone in for like these elite national prospects in the state of Louisiana that LSU had been making long-standing pushes for and won that battle.
And that's why this means so much. Like, if you get a win here, right, in terms of, like, you're looking at the potential of, like, okay, if you can go into Baton Rouge and win that head-to-head against LSU, what else are you going to be able to do as a staff in terms of player acquisition?
You can win today. It would be a win today. But the goal isn't to get the commitment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, you kind of everybody kind of waffles back and forth on, would you rather have him committed and then, try to fight off everybody late, or would you rather be kind of lying in the weeds and attempt to flip late? To me, I lean toward the best way to get a fish in the boat is to get it on the line first. So today would be getting the fish on the line. And then you have till December to reel it in and get it in the boat without it, getting off the hook. So I would, if I'm A&M, I'm hoping the hat that's picked today is mine. But regardless, this thing's got some more twists and turns in it. It just feels that way.
Yeah, a lot of that will have to do with what actually happens on the field over the next couple months. How much will it doesn't need to be an undefeated season going to the national championship, but just a solid season, being in contention in that playoff discussion late in November, early in December. How much could that even add to that recruiting momentum?
Yeah, you're in year 2 of Mike Elko, so there's still some sizzle that can be sold instead of the steak.
Mm-hmm.
But as time goes, time in the saddle, time in the chair goes. That's what we saw with Jimbo. Jimbo was really good at selling the vision, the sizzle of the program, but as he got into year 4, 5, and 6, you're going, okay, like they need to win.
Yeah.
Like the steak's got to be there. So Mike Elko and company are still selling the sizzle, and they still have some room to sell the sizzle, but the quicker that the steak catches up and the steak starts tasting good, then the sizzle gets better as well. So I think that it can only further their recruiting efforts. And who knows, like a good season could be what, if you go into Baton Rouge and win and Lamar Brown's committed to LSU, could that be enough to get him back on your side? I don't know. You never know in recruiting. There's nothing ever definitive. And I've got some notes upcoming later today probably on a pair of commits that are getting big pushes elsewhere that A&M I think is going to have a fight on their hands, as well as a player that I think A&M is quietly surging for. And there's not been much national discussion about A&M's chances with this guy, but I think based off intel we've been able to gather in the last 24, 48 hours, I think the Aggies are they're in a much better spot than a lot of folks I think want to realize.
Well, you heard him, folks. If you want to catch Ryan Brauninger dropping those notes on the premium board. I know you like baseball.
Yeah, that's what I do like baseball. Thank you.
Ronnie likes baseball. The MLB draft is coming up at a weird time because we got SEC Media Day, so you're covering both, as a company. But there's a lot of talk.
Well, there's a lot of intrigue, right? Because of the guys that are on A&M's draft eligible list, not only players off of last year's roster, but also incoming freshmen. And there's got to be more discussion. It's weird to me that we're leading into this draft, and I haven't seen a lot of national media outlets like it, but I don't know that it's necessarily their job to opine on the calendar of college baseball and professional baseball as it sits right now. And Major League Baseball is the one that makes all these decisions. And so really, I don't know that a pushback from college coaches having the draft on July 13th when you're trying to figure out how many scholarships, how much NIL do I have, what does the scholarship situation look like post-house settlement? What does my scholarship situation look like with players being grandfathered into the new rule? that's all can be, you can have a really good idea and picture of what A&M's 2025 and 2026 roster is going to look like. I don't think that's the case right now, but let's say that they were in a different type of spot, and still the draft could come in and light dynamite to all of that really quickly. And A&M is in on a couple of portal targets still to add to their roster, but some of these portal targets are waiting to see what happens with the draft. You have a kid that just committed in Maddox Lotta. I mean, if he is on campus, if he makes it to campus, if he doesn't sign, I think he's going to have a decision to make. Like, do I want to start my professional career? Do I want to play in the SEC? Because he's got enough of a skill set and enough on his resume that somebody would pick him unless he says, I don't want to go. So he's going to have a decision to make. But if you get that guy on campus, man, you start looking at A&M's lineup and you start dreaming on what the starting 9 could be. And you're going, man, if Maddox Lotta's in there with Chris Akopian and Caden Sorrell and Gavin Grahovic and Bear Harrison and Jake Dewar and TK, and you start, man, this lineup there's a lot to like there. But for A&M, this is a really key week. So this time next week, we will have a much cleaner picture of what their roster is going to look like. And they've got, there's not much that Mike Early and company can do about it. Like, they're just in wait and see mode with guys like Shane Sadeo and Ben Royo and Weston Moss, who I'm leaning heavily toward Weston Moss coming to school. Kendall was even more definitive than that when I had him on yesterday. What does Caden Wilson do? Does he want to sign and start his professional career? Does he want to come back to school and maybe push for a weekend rotation spot if he can get it? Or at the very least, an increased role out of the bullpen. So if the things fall A&M's way, you're going to look at a roster and go, okay, is it going to be preseason number 1? No. But do A&M fans really want that again? Probably not. But you're going to look at a roster, and what have I said? Like, your goal in, I think, any sport is to try to put together, no different than your boy Bucky's doing in basketball. I know it's a lot to put on his plate in year 1, but his goal is to, all right, I'm going to try to put together a roster that can at least put us in contention. Like, can this roster get us to the second weekend in March?
Yeah.
And if you put together that roster, then everything's on the table. It's no different. Mike Early's trying to put together a roster that can get him to Omaha. Can this roster get me to Omaha? If you say yes, the talent's there for us to get to Omaha, then you're going, all right, then you're kind of at the mercy of the game of baseball from then on out.
Yeah, Bucky McMillan was also in that wait-and-see mode with Mackenzie Mbako announcing what he was going to do for the draft. And in the same way that you're waiting for some baseball players to either sign or not sign, how about some of the freshmen that could really make an impact from day one that maybe are a threat to sign, and who are some of those names that A&M
on paper, this looks like the best, most talented class that A&M, of baseball players that A&M will have brought in a while, especially on the position player front. When you look at guys like Blaine Bullard and Matthew Boughton and Nico Partita and Boston Kellner and Josiah Hartshorn and Jorian Wilson, like, all of those guys have real SEC-capable tools early in their career. Like, they're not like these prospects that you're kind of having to dream on. Like, they've got a skill set that can go and play and impact the game next year. And what you worry about in baseball, much like all the other sports as true freshmen, is the physicality. Like, are they ready for the physicality, the day in, day out physicality of the league? This class, like, they're not lacking that at all. Mm-hmm. Now, you are going to lose some of those guys, no question. I think the ones that the coaching staff is looking at and going, man, I don't know. Blaine Bullard, like, he has gotten so much draft helium recently, just flying up boards. And, my comp for Blaine is Steve Finley. That's probably too old school for you two guys. He's not Pete Curl Armstrong. He's,
no one is, really.
Switch hitter that can really run and defend, emerging power like this. If you told me Blaine Bullard was coming to school, I don't think there's a need for A&M to go continue to search for a portal bat, like at least an outfield bat. Like, I think that if Blaine Bullard's coming, that's your guy. You look at Matthew Boughton, one of the slickest infielders, high school infielders I've ever watched. He's old. Like, he's going to graduate high school old and at 19. And so does that factor in his decision where he's like, man, I'm already almost 21. Where am I going to get my most games? That kind of stuff goes into his decision. Josiah Hartshorn would be a Jace Lavalette power profile. It's that kind of juice. I think he's signable. But if Josiah Hartshorn comes to school, does A&M need to go try to not find another first baseman in the portal? I don't think so. So a lot of these decisions by the high school incoming class are going to factor in the decisions that Mike Early and Caleb Longley have to make with these guys remaining in the portal.
So we talked about like a bunch of different pitchers, that are on draft watch for this A&M team. As you know, pitching insanely important, but what is the plan then, do you think? Like if, say, all of these guys get taken in the MLB draft,
well,
you're reaching for that.
Yeah,
I'm saying like what's the game plan?
And that's why I think I posted an update yesterday. They're still in communication with Nate Taylor out of Georgia, who's in the portal, and they would like Nate Taylor. And I think if you're a coach, don't you have to plan for worst case scenario?
You do,
right? And so like if worst case scenario happens, as you just suggested, then Nate Taylor goes, man, that's an impact starter on the weekend. But if those guys come back, I still think they would try to push maybe to get Nate Taylor, but they'd be very, very happy with Shane Sadeo, Weston Moss, Carson Bailey as your weekend rotation. And that's kind of discounting a guy like Gavin Lyons or Aiden Sims or Caden McCoy. Like
Josh Stewart coming back.
Well, I think Josh is going to impact the back end without question, right? Like, and having him fully healthy, and who knows, maybe his shoulder needed this break too. Because he had some shoulder tenderness going into last year. It's what kept him from being available on the opening weekend in 2025 was shoulder tenderness. And then he goes out there in the first inning of the second weekend of the year, he tears his ACL while pitching. So maybe the arm needed this break as well. But yeah, having Josh back is a huge factor on the back end of the bullpen. And you bringing in Carson Bailey, who is going to be as big a stuff as you've got on the staff. That was a huge win out of the portal.
And in the same light that when you look at what had to be done in basketball with 81 of the top 100 portal players being committed within 2 weeks of the season ending, we're now approaching a month off from the season ending in baseball. Just how much talent is still left at the top end of the portal, or even guys that A&M would still be
I'll say this.
taking?
The portal this year is light. It's light compared to what it has been. And maybe, the house settlement stuff has kept some people planted where they're at. The biggest, Chris Akopian was the best bat available in the portal, and like he can really, really hit. But it's still not a Braden Montgomery profile where you're going, this guy's a lay down like top 10, 15 pick. Akopian can get there, no question about it. He can get there. But Braden was, everybody knew he was going to go super high in the draft. I just think it's light, especially on the mound. It's been light. You saw mass exodus from Tennessee, and now looking like what that may have been planned by them, like they wanted to run off a bunch of these guys. But it's been a down year, I would say, for overall talent in the portal. And you look at what A&M's been able to put together, especially like if they get Maddox Lotta to school, you look at that position player group that includes Maddox Lotta and it includes Hakopian and Jake Dewar. And I'm telling you what, perhaps the most important and impressive get so far to me has been Zane Becker, the catcher from Arkansas. Because when you have an entrenched starter at a position like that, it's hard to go get a really talented guy that's going to say, you know what, I'll go compete with that. And I think it needs to be a competition. If you're Mike Early, you're going, outside of Grahovic, Sorrell, and probably Hakopian, everything's up for grabs. Isn't that how you would go into this season?
Yeah.
Because of what happened last year? So, go earn it. Go earn the playing time. And if Zane Becker beats out Bear Harrison, then he's going to catch. Now, I like what Bear's got coming back. And, when Bear's right and he's healthy and he's feeling good, we know how Bear can impact the game. But what happened at the end of the year when Bear was just taxed because he's catching every inning of every game? You saw a lot of worn and track fly balls. Same thing you saw with Jackson Appel the year before. So having somebody that can come in and spell that catcher is going to be good for the position as a whole throughout the entirety of the schedule.
Yeah. Bronny, thanks so much for joining us.
Yep.
Always great giving us updates on recruiting in baseball. Make sure you subscribe to TexAgs and go read both Jason Howe and Billy Lucci's update and what Bronny just posted about 3 targets. Always giving us great stuff, Bronny. Thanks so much. On the other side of this break, we're going to tune in and listen to the fan show, guys, and talk some A&M football, A&M basketball, maybe a little bit of A&M baseball. Who knows what the fan show has in store, but this is TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Matthew, you know how about 4 minutes ago I said you never know what you're going to get from the fan show guys? Well, we may not even get the fan show guys, so we're working on figuring that out. So sorry to all who were excited to see the fan show guys.
But we got fans in the chat.
Yeah, we do, and we actually want to hear from
Let's make it a
fans
fan
in the
show.
chat. So we can make it a virtual fan show. Who needs fan show guys at the desk when you've got fans in the YouTube chat, in the TexAgs chat? And we're going to read some chats and discuss. We're going to go over to Amber Heath at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center, who's going to read one of those chats from our virtual fan show.
Dermdoc said, what is the Ags total for wins in football?
I was talking about Vegas win totals because that'd be 7.5, believe it or not. But look, we got a whole list of over-under win totals for every team in the SEC. And with media days coming up, it's pretty relevant.
Yeah.
I've already, I travel out of state occasionally to partake in such recreational activities. So I think it's fun to talk about. And I think it's like a good gauge. And what do we expect? What does Vegas expect from these people? What do fans and bettors, sharps, what are they thinking of in terms of wins for these teams on a yearly basis?
Yeah, I think A&M being at 7.5 is, until proven otherwise that this team can win 9 and 10 games year in and year out, 7.5 and 8.5 is probably where you're going to find that line at for Texas A&M. Some of the other ones we can go in order are Alabama at 9.5, Arkansas at 5.5 wins, Auburn at 7.5, Florida at 7.5, Georgia at 9.5, Kentucky at 4.5. Not much faith in Zach Calzada up there. LSU at 8.5. Mississippi State at 3.5. Missouri 7.5. Oklahoma 6.5. Ole Miss 8.5. South Carolina, very surprising with Lenora Sellers and the hype behind that team, also at 7.5. Tennessee, who's going to be their quarterback? They are at 8.5. Texas at 9.5, obviously A&M at 7.5, and then Vanderbilt at 4.5. Are there any immediately after hearing that stand out to you as either that's a little bit higher than what I was expecting, or maybe a chance to make some money going over on that's a lot lower than what I was expecting?
Yeah, I got a couple for you. Tennessee 8.5. I already took the under at plus money. I don't know if you can still get it at plus money. Hopefully you can out there, but look. Sure, you're going to have, some decent pieces on that defense there, but, you wipe clean your wide receiver slate. You don't have an all-SEC first-team running back. You have no idea what's going to go on at quarterback. Offensive line's going to be shaken up this year. Are we sure, right? And even with AT talked about it earlier, Tennessee might have the easiest schedule in the SEC, and that might be the case, but getting to 9 wins with this schedule is pretty tough. You got Georgia, right, which you got to play. Alabama, you got to go on the road this time. And I think this is a much better Alabama team than we've seen. AT talked about going to Florida, right? So that's already 3 right there. And then you got to find somewhere else. Sure, they get fortunate, drawing Vanderbilt and Mississippi State on the road. But I don't think Arkansas is necessarily a walk in the park. They lost to Arkansas last year. And then I think Oklahoma has a chance to be better. And with Tennessee getting worse, if they slip up anywhere, right? And Bronny keeps talking about, I happen to like the Baylor-Auburn matchup week 1.
Yeah.
That's my sneaky college football implication game. But he likes looking at that Syracuse game at a neutral site, 12.5-point spread. And look, Syracuse is a well-coached team. They got Steve Angeli at quarterback and a lot of other question marks there. But that's another spot where you could slip up. So, and Diego Pavia talking about how Vanderbilt's running the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
I find it hard to think that at plus money, there's a better chance that they go 9-3 than 8-4 with that roster. I say no. So I kind of like that Tennessee under 8.5.
Speaking of Diego Pavia, the one that stood out to me was Vanderbilt at 4.5. I just think the amount of swagger and aura that he plays with, you're telling me Vanderbilt's not going to win more than 4.5 games? When you look at this schedule, Charleston Southern, all right, that's a win. Virginia Tech, in Blacksburg, maybe that's a toss-up. Just looking at non-conference first, they're going to win probably Charleston Southern, Georgia State, and Utah State.
They lost to Georgia State last year. And that was a
But that was a
garbage,
shocker.
that
Yes,
was a
because
garbage Georgia State team. A garbage Georgia State team.
their head's going to be screwed on straight this year. Diego Pavia is not losing that game.
Yeah, Elliott went to go be the tight ends coach at South Carolina in the spring. So Georgia State didn't even have spring football that year. They hire Del McGee just like out of nowhere. And I don't think that they've done a particularly great job. That was a team that I made a lot of money on last year, taking the other side, But Utah State, they got Bronco Mendenhall there. That's the team that A&M is going to be playing. Bronco Mendenhall, completely turned around that New Mexico team last year, and you see Devin Dampiers, going on to be the starting quarterback at Utah. And I don't know, we're not talking about like an Alabama or a Georgia, or an LSU. These aren't automatic wins in your out of conference like they are for most teams in the SEC. As we saw last year with Vanderbilt, those are not automatic games.
True.
They might be double-digit favorites in those games. Actually, I can guarantee you that they probably will, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to win those games. And then in the SEC, Vanderbilt does not get the luxury of playing themselves.
No.
And they don't play Mississippi State either.
They do get Missouri at home, and I've got my own questions about what level of football will Missouri be playing in late October when, let's be honest here, they're probably already going to have a couple losses and be out of the playoff picture. And then they get Kentucky at home. To me, if you just win 3 non-conference games, let's say you've got Charleston Southern as a win, and you just go 2-1 against Virginia Tech, Georgia State, and Utah State, which is certainly doable. You're just looking for 2 wins in SEC play to go more than 4.5. Kentucky will probably end up being one of the bottom 2 teams in the conference with Mississippi State, and you get them at home late in the season. It's hard for me to not believe that Vanderbilt, just looking at their schedule a couple months out from the season, can't get to more than 4.5 wins. And we haven't even thrown in what if they beat LSU? They shocked Alabama last year. What if they beat LSU at home? Or what if they beat Auburn at home? What's Auburn going to be looking like in November? That's not exactly, we're not projecting Auburn to be a juggernaut. They're a different team at home, but Vanderbilt gets Auburn at their place, at Vanderbilt.
I think Vegas agrees with you as well. There's a lot of juice to go over. What I mean by that is you have to pay a lot of money in order to bet on Vanderbilt. You're only making 60 cents to every dollar that you bet when you're taking that over, right? So a lot of books were even offering Vanderbilt a 5.5, right? If you want to go a step further and predict that Vanderbilt makes a bowl game, you can get them at to over 5.5 wins at plus 130. So I think that's definitely an interesting one. A little too much juice for me to be gobbling up that Vanderbilt value right there. But I know we got to hit a break here soon. But look, let me clear the air with Billy and Brawny, right? They think that I'm some Arkansas stan, that I think Arkansas is the greatest football team of all time. All I said to David, and David brings this on here all the time, is that I think Arkansas could be better than what people think. And Vegas has them winning 5 games. The over and win total is at 5.5, juice to the under. And I'm I think they can make a bowl game. And that's some outrageous take in this office. I'm some, oh my gosh, look at this kid. What a Taylon Green stan. What a Arkansas Razorback lover. Okay, so what? I took Arkansas over 5.5 wins at plus 130. Sue me. Sue me.
I think there's a lot of value to be had, and we'll discuss this more on the other side of this break. Also talking about maybe odds to win the SEC and who we like. I know last year we talked kind of all conferences and said, who do we like outside of the top 3 best odds to maybe make a run? We were on SMU last year in the ACC, and they ended up making the playoffs. So we'll go through that, odds to win the SEC, and some more talk on win totals on the other side of this break. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. What a great song, Matthew. Hey, maybe for the next break, they can play Rattlin' Bog, and we can finish our drinks between Thunderstruck and Rattlin' Bog.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers.
If there's one thing I know about Matthew Dawson, he loves a cold beer.
Look, guilty.
Hand up, guilty.
What am I supposed to say to that? I mean, like, I'm sure there are people.
What'd you make me try the other day? What was it?
A Kona Big Wave.
Oh yeah.
Kind of a.
Not as good as Shiner.
No, not at all. Look, and Cullen, who we had on earlier, big Miller guy. That's huge because Harold Dawson, my dad, big time Miller guy. He works in like the advertising industry, so like did a lot of stuff for them. So that's good news. But look, I'm impartial when it comes to a lot of that stuff. So whatever's willing to sponsor me, anyone who wants to reach out and sponsor me, I mean,
Matthew Dawson NIL deal.
I'm open. My DMs are open. My email is whatever.
BIL, we're calling it BIL, Beers, Image, and Likeness. But as college kids, we don't really have too much to complain about. Just whatever is in front of me, I'll drink it. I'm not picky. But let's get back into some more serious A&M football talk. Let's go to the Angry Elephant News and Social Center. Amber Heath has some updates from the YouTube chat for us.
Yeah, mainly everyone in the comments is just saying that the South Bend Notre game has to be a win. There's no questions about it. It has to be a win.
I don't know if I think it has to be a must-win game, but I definitely agree with Durham Doc and a lot of other people in the chat that are saying it's going to set the tone for the rest of the season because it is your first tough test, but you can still lose that game, and maybe it's going to be tough to make up for the win total discussion we were just having, but as far as making the SEC championship, making the college football playoff, it's not the end of the world because there's still a world where A&M can be pretty much what we thought the situation was going to be like last year, maybe possibly making the SEC championship at 10-2 with only one loss in the SEC, and then losing that SEC championship and still potentially getting in. So the Notre Dame game isn't the end-all be-all for the SEC hopes, obviously because it's not a conference game, but it does 100% set the tone, in my opinion, for SEC play, getting right into it with Auburn and then Arkansas, and you're having to play teams that are certainly not layups.
Yeah, winning a game like that provides a ton of momentum, but also on the flip end of that, ask Notre Dame what it's like, coming out of, what was that, week 2 or week 3? Week 2, they hosted the Dirty Dogs of DeKalb, and they came out of there with a loss against a team that had never, defeated an AP-ranked top 10 team ever. So, and then they ended up playing in the national championship game, right? So it's about winning, at the right times. It's about, getting together at the right time. But yeah, if you win that game, describing that game as a litmus test, I think you can be correct in saying that, but sometimes it's a litmus test, and other times it's not. You don't know what's going to happen with injuries and whatnot. Like, there are still 11 other games you can win. You can lose that game against Notre Dame and literally just win out. Like, that's a possibility that could happen. Not saying it's likely to happen. I'm not necessarily betting on putting money on A&M winning more than 7.5 games, 8.5 games, whatever, like the Vegas wants to settle at here in August. But I don't think, in my opinion, that's a must-win game. But if you win that game, that's a huge deal. I think it's a bigger deal if you win that game than it is if you lose that game.
Absolutely. And I think that I don't like to say things are must-win just yet. Like, we're in the preseason. I think once the season has started and you're looking at how things have shook out at that point, and you can look back on what's happened and look ahead to the games that are upcoming, then I think you can say that if we're in the middle of the season and things have gone well for A&M, that maybe going to LSU is a must-win game. And not necessarily because A&M's back is against the wall, but because if you win that game, the discussion around A&M football for the rest of the season is completely different. In the same way that maybe you didn't see it as a must-win game last year, but winning that game, regardless of what happened after it, put A&M on a different pedestal from just a team that, okay, they're a top 25 team, to a team that was legitimately in the playoff discussion. And eventually they weren't at the end of the season, but who's to say that coming into the end of October, A&M is again 6-1, 7-1, that a game like that becomes a must-win game. But I don't think we can crown games as must-win games just yet. I think you have to play a couple games before you can look ahead and say that's a must-win game.
Especially the eighth odds-on favorite to win the national championship that you're going to be playing in September. Like, it's not a must-win game.
Yeah,
but boy,
it will help to win.
Boy, am I excited for that game because it's going to be competitive.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what you love about college football. You know, like sure, regionality and rivalries and traditions, like all that's, but like also the competitive nature of big-time games like that. With a chance to be hosting College Game Day there in South Bend.
Yeah.
So, I'm pumped. I'm jazzed for that game.
And you never know with the future of college football and scheduling, if the SEC does add a conference game, that's probably going to discourage teams from scheduling these
Agreed.
high-profile non-conference games because it doesn't matter. You know, playing Notre Dame for the spectacle and for a fan of an A&M to go to South Bend and see Touchdown Jesus and watch a game at that stadium, you may not get the chance to do that for a long time because if a team like A&M is already going to be playing 9 SEC games, what is the necessity to go schedule an Ohio State or a Michigan? I know the next high-profile team they've got is Arizona State, which when they scheduled that game a couple of years ago for like 2029 and 2030, I think it is, who knew that Arizona State would be an emerging power like they are now? But my point is, when else will you get the chance to travel to a historic venue like this to watch? So as a fan, it is good to see that A&M is playing Notre Dame, Texas is playing Ohio State, that these high-profile games are still happening out of conference because in a couple years, maybe 5-10 years, maybe these higher-profile non-conference games aren't actually happening anymore.
Yeah, and it doesn't impact your ability to win an SEC championship.
It does not.
Which you lose to Notre Dame in September last year. And then guess what? Or I guess, was it August 30th? Whatever. Whatever. Week 1. You lose to Notre Dame, and you're still in it. Literally that last week in the season, you have a chance to win a game to make the SEC championship. So, out-of-conference game, tough. It'll be fun. It'll be competitive. Not a must-win.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more at what you hinted at on the other side of this break when we discuss the current odds to win the SEC. And as we talked about earlier, last year when we were hosting, we maybe were closer than we thought when we were predicting teams to win other conferences like the Big Ten and the ACC. So we'll get into that on who we like outside of the top 3 in odds to win the SEC on the other side of this break. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. making me want to chug this water.
Just got a feeling, right?
Yeah, when that song comes on, it's just good vibes only. Welcome back into TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. One last segment in the Rollo Insurance Studio. Luke Evangelist and Matthew Dawson filling in for David Nuno. I believe, who's in the host chair tomorrow?
That'll be Ryan Brauninger.
That would be Ryan Brauninger. You just heard from him at the top of this hour, and he'll be back tomorrow giving you all his thoughts on bourbon and recruiting and baseball and all the things that he does. But before we let y'all go, we want to continue that discussion on odds to win the SEC from teams in this conference. And when you look at the odds on the screen, if you're tuned in on YouTube, last year when we hosted the show, we looked at the Big Ten and the ACC and picked teams outside of the top 3 best odds to win the conference. And last year, the teams that we picked were Penn State and SMU. Neither of those teams ended up winning the conference, but they did make the conference championship game.
Could have hedged.
With odds outside the top 3. So what I'm saying is, whatever team we pick this year, go ahead and pencil them in for the SEC championship because we were spot on last year. So, Matthew, when you look at that, outside of the top 3 of Texas at plus 280, Georgia plus 280, and Alabama at plus 490, who do you like?
Outside of the top 3 is tough because I actually love Alabama this year. I already sprinkled some to put them to win the national championship just because I think that they're really good. Plus, with Alabama, like, you're going to take over 9.5 wins at, like, what, minus 110, minus 120? Why are you not taking them to win the SEC championship at plus 490 or some places plus 500?
Yeah.
You know, like, why wouldn't you do that? Scheduling dynamic matters a ton. I know we talked about in the first hour that, like, Auburn's not necessarily a team we're super high on, but in terms of, like, the scheduling dynamic there, like, you could lose to Georgia and Alabama and win the rest of those easier SEC games, and you could sneak in and not even be an elite team.
Yeah.
You know? So that would be my sneaky pick. I don't think I'll lay any money on that, though.
Yeah, I'm conflicted because I like A&M, but it's just I gotta see it to believe it, and I need it. I'll be fine if I'm wrong this year, not betting on them to make the title game or win it, but I just need to see it, and I think a lot of people in the YouTube chat agree with that.
I took a plus 1,900 last year, and you know what? We were a game away from seeing them.
You were.
You know, like
it's not bad.
It's not bad. You know, like because I just thought like the ceiling of that schedule, right? You played some tough teams, but you got all the tough games at home.
Yep.
You know, so you don't get that same scheduling dynamic this year for Texas A&M, but I think like you get some of that with Auburn, even Alabama. Hugh Freeze is Alabama's number forever.
Yeah.
And you get them at home.
Crazy things happen in that stadium. Unfortunately, I was there to witness it last year in 4 overtimes. So
that's not financial advice, by the way. I'm not going to put money on it. So I'm just saying, like, if you're going to look at something outside the top 3, that's a sneaky one.
Yeah, if you want real financial advice, Stephen McGee's got you covered there. But if you want some
Hamilton Tiger Cats are minus 4.5 tomorrow or Saturday. That's advice.
That's advice right there. That's a Matthew Dawson, our resident sports, what are we calling? Daily fantasy. We've got to go back to that verbiage. Daily fantasy expert and maybe a little sprinkling on betting expert as well. I'm Luke Evangelist. Thank you all so much for tuning in as the 2 goobers and nerds got to host the show today. Thank you to Ambry at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center and Nick behind the glass. We'll see y'all tomorrow for Brawny hosting on TexAgs Live.